Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael, the Longhorn Byrd.
Hook 'em. Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. And today's episode, we get to talk with our friend, Terri Ross.
Michael, before we formally introduce Terri, work with me here. Are you familiar with the Energizer Bunny?
Well, of course I am. And why in the world are you asking about a toy rabbit wearing sunglasses that beats a drum bearing the Energizer logo?
Okay, I'm going to answer yours question with a question. Do you know how long that advertisement campaign has been in existence?
I don't know, although I can picture my college years seeing it, so I'm going to guess a really long time.
That's a good answer. It started October 30th of 1988, and for those of you who are math challenged like me, that's 32 years.
Okay, and so what does this have to do with our guest, Terri?
Okay, good. We're getting somewhere. In the business of, if you have a business, you have to have a great marketing campaign, and that breaks you out from everyone else, right? And the Energizer Bunny campaign has helped continue to propel Energizer batteries as one of the most well-known battery companies, generating almost $2 billion in 2019.
Okay, you still didn't answer my question. What does this have to do with Terri?
So when I was preparing for this, I have spent a lot of time with Terri over the years. I've seen her speak. And as I was getting ready for this episode, I couldn't get the Energizer Bunny out of my head because Terri is so full of energy. She's a self-starter. She keeps you motivated to keep improving your business via marketing, sales, and other aspects. She is the Energizer Bunny.
Okay, well, I love
that.
I'm going to do a little bit of a more in-depth introduction than just calling her the Energizer Bunny, but not much.
Okay, fair enough.
So Terri is the founder and CEO of Terri Ross Consulting. She's a prolific speaker. I mean, we probably don't really need to introduce her. Many of you have heard her. She has her own podcast, In Touch with Terri. Brad has been on that twice now.
Dos.
And Terri, we'll get to this, but I haven't been on yet. We'll talk.
I know. I'm saving the best for last.
I knew you. Thank you for knowing that. I'm just kidding. And then, really, I mean, Terri is an OG of the aesthetic space. She's been a practice manager, business consultant, and even prior to that, in industry, and so just has so much wisdom that can be offered for businesses in the aesthetic space. Terri, welcome.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, this was like the most honored welcome I've ever had. I mean, and I would like to consider myself, I am that girl hopping around, right? Giving everybody the most high level of energy to keep it together. But I love both introductions. So thank you both for having me. This is what I love to do. And I love working with the both of you. It's been a long time. So super excited.
Absolutely. Well, Terri, our theme for this season for the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto is thinking outside the box. And as Michael mentioned when he brought you in, look, you have your own podcast. You're a nationally well-known speaker. You have your own consulting company. But you have a really cool journey that got you here. Can you share with our audience where you first started in sales and with the pharmaceutical and device companies?
Yeah, God, thank you so much for asking. Well, so I'm from the Midwest. I'm a Midwest Detroit girl, and I started off, going to Central Michigan University. I thought I wanted to be a physician. I went to Wayne State for a couple of years, but I was so entrenched in medicine that I really realized that while I loved medicine, I thought I was better suited, because I'm the bunny, more on the business side of things. And so I had gotten my first sales position, working for Johnson & Johnson, working with Indigo Medical, which was a surgical division of J&J. And, that is a dog-eat-dog job. You guys are men, so you're going to appreciate this. My initial things that I was selling were radioactive seeds for prostate cancer and a machine for BPH, which is an enlarged prostate. So you can imagine I'm in my early 20s and all I saw was stuff in the OR. Maybe I wanted to see a different version of that. But yeah, so that's where I started. And, their training is no bullshit. I mean, I was in Cincinnati for 6 weeks, and it was really sort of the core foundation of formal professional sales training that I've studied throughout these years.
That's awesome. And so talk a little bit about, you went and got into the aesthetic space and how on the industry side initially, right?
Yeah. So obviously from J&J, I have been in many therapeutic areas. I worked for an endocrinology company for 5 years. I was in oncology. I was in cardiology, asthma and allergy. And at 32, I got my first director position. I was managing 20 states and 12 reps, and I was traveling a ton. So now I moved from Michigan to Los Angeles, and I'm divorced, but I was married at the time, and we were just two ships in the night. I was gone about 75% of the time. And there was a position for Medicis. This is 2007. And I thought, shit, Beverly Hills, by the way, to be the director for that territory. And it took me 6 months to get that job.
Wow.
But I surpassed everyone, and I was humbled and so fortunate to get it. So that was my first corporate position back in 2007 with Medicis. And then that led me, I was recruited to launch Cool Sculpting pre-IPO in the US and Canada. But again, still traveling a ton. And then that led me to the birth of Terri Ross Consulting.
Yeah. Well, and then there was a pivot in between. I'd love to hear, like, what made you decide to go shift to kind of practice management, kind of for a specific practice out of kind of your industry gig?
Yeah. It's a personal story, actually. I wanted to have a child, and we needed to go through fertility. So our physician was like, Terri, traveling is just really not in your best interest to do that right now. So it was one of the hardest decisions I have ever had to make. I think, now we're always looking at all this female empowerment, and I was one of the only 2 female directors for a very, very long time. So, I made that hard decision to start a family, and, I didn't really even have a plan B, candidly. I didn't. And then shortly after Zeltiq, I quit that position. I got my initial call from Garth Fisher, who's a very well-known plastic in Beverly Hills. And he said, hey, I'm starting a med spa. Can you help me? And that's literally how it started. I worked for him I was his consultant for about a year, and scaled his business to a little over $1.6 million in 1 year. Wow. And then Paul Nassif started to call me, and the physicians at Lasky started to call me, and so blessed and so fortunate. And then the physicians at Lasky said, hey, we have this med spa. It's underperforming. We'd love to make you an equity partner. We don't know what we're doing. And here you go. And so I sort of just, I think took my industry knowledge, took my corporate knowledge, took my salesmanship and business acumen, and, figured it out.
That's amazing. And, we know you're a consultant, and we'll talk about that in a minute now, but one of the things that I think is impressive is that you're a consultant who's actually done it yourself.
Yep.
And you're not just telling people what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, and I sorry.
Go ahead, Terri.
No, I do pride myself on that. I think there's, very few in the industry, but the few that are, I think what makes me different is I talk the talk, I've walked the walk. What I teach is not anecdotal. It's what I did personally, and everything I've written and everything I've developed is really from, personal experience, and professional, and now having the opportunity to have worked with so many practices across the country.
Yeah. And I think our audience wants to know, so did you have a child? And if so, how awesome is she?
I did. 2 rounds of fertility. My little miracle baby, her name's Sloan, which means warrior. She's 7. And if you guys have seen me, right, she's my little mini me,
yes,
my little mascot. Yes.
We've seen y'all on the beach on Instagram many times, and it is your mini-me.
Yes.
I just had a sales training. I was so happy. I had it the last weekend in August, which was postponed from the medical spa show, by the way.
Wow.
We had 16 people come, 7 on virtual, and she came and she did her own little presentation, by the way.
Oh, wow.
For the tribe. She did. It was great.
That's awesome.
Well, tell us real fast. Tell us about the tribe.
Yes.
The tribe. The tribe is such a mix of both medical spa and plastic surgery. People that are clients or want to be clients. I have a private Facebook group, and it's just a wonderful community that I really want people, kind of like, the tribe that you guys have as well. People sharing resources, sharing best practices, sharing what the problems are, because candidly, whether you are a startup, you're thinking about it, you're a couple years in, or you're 10 years plus, I have found that the issues are truly the same fundamental issues that I think.
Well, that perfectly leads us to where you are with your consulting company. So let's talk about, why'd you really start? It sounds like you obviously had a good pathway, but you really put through some gas on it the last few years.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, like I said, it was sort of birthed out of Garth calling me, asking me. I developed Terri Ross Consulting, not really knowing what I would do with it. And then I think it wasn't until being part of Lasky for almost 5 years and taking a practice, and it took a team. It certainly wasn't just me. It took a team to make it, but to scale a business from $500,000 to about $3.5 million in the mecca of beauty and in such a competitive environment, I thought, how can I help other people? How can I take what I did? And if I could do it in Beverly Hills, how can I help others replicate and do the same thing? And so, and I remember it started, when Alex, I think from AmSpa had his first show in LA 6 years ago or whenever, right. I was the one sitting in this tiny little space with like 15 people, learning as much as I possibly could. So, it really elevated what my company's about. And then obviously working with you guys as well, trying to get my arms around the legal part of it and the compliance part of it. So I love our synergistic collaboration because they're all hand in hand. We can't.
Yeah, and I will say, Terri, this goes back to you. We always call you an OG. You were there in the beginning with AmSpa. Day one.
Day one. Right, with my manuals, learning it all. Yeah.
The printed notebooks.
Boy, has it evolved.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay, well, this is the test. I'm going to ask you a question to have you drop a little knowledge for our audience.
All right.
So talk to us. What are some of the foundational elements which most practices need to concentrate on with their sales and marketing?
That is a loaded question, and I'm going to say that even within COVID, I have had to make some significant changes in where I have pivoted, but all for the best. And what I would say is that while sales is my jam, it's what I live, eat, and breathe and have studied for so long. You cannot have sales without understanding the financial health of the practice. And so in the midst of COVID, we've written an entire financial foundations course based on 7 modules. And I think that the pearls come from understanding, again, your benchmarks, what KPIs to measure, what your net profit per treatment is, what is your hourly revenue. And if you don't know some of those things, how can you have goals? People will say, Terri, I want to grow, or I want to get to 1 million, or I want to get to 3 or 4 million. And if I ask them how, they have no idea because they don't know any of those things. So I would say it's really taking a couple steps back. Mm-hmm. Number one, obviously safety, compliance, legal, always at the paramount, always at the forefront. And then as we get into growing a practice and or even setting yourself apart, I always talk about the Simon Sinek book, but like, what is your why? It's simple to say, I want to rent some space and get some equipment, and I hope the patients will come. And that's just such a, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Because what keeps the doors open is the patients. And I often see just people not allocating a training budget or just a budget to understand their business. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask this question from personal experience. I remember when Brad and I were meeting with Robin Pugh, who's been a guest on here. I know you know Robin, Terri. And the first time he asked us what our data said and our KPIs when we said we wanted to grow, we looked at him with a blank stare back and didn't have any of that data. So do you have that experience when you start meeting with them? Do they track their data?
Sadly, no, which was honestly the reason Robbie and I we hungered for months. We wrote this course because we realized that the profit and loss statement wasn't set up the right way. No one knew what reports to run in their software system. They had no idea what KPIs even stood for. And we're so proud of this course because if you take it, I had Paco Canellis and Heather Furness, and I think they're your clients, right? I can say that because he wrote me. He said, Terri, I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on other courses and other things. He said this was the best thing I've ever done. And they're veterans. Yeah.
And well, believe it or not, Paco was also on this season.
Well, Paco and Heather together.
Yeah,
they're
Paco
special.
and Heather, we have a special with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know it's been a game changer for us when we, was it 2009, a couple of years ago, got the CRM and started really tracking. And it's just amazing if you have some context to know what's actually happening and are measuring it.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think what I love about Terri is you've been literally, from ground zero about how do I sell. And then once you got into the sales side, how do I manage? Once you're in the management, how do I look about P&L? Like all those, it's the full boat of what needs to happen. And I know that, when I've seen you speak in the past, you have this great passion about making sure people understand not only the simplest things of, as you said, I say simple, your actual numbers, but about how you're supposed to promote yourself, how you're supposed to promote your business. And I think that's what's so engaging about you. And any other thoughts you have on what you see when people are trying to market themselves and when they mess up and they don't realize how they missed it, and they're like, oh, Terri, my numbers aren't adding up. You look at the P&L and you're like, okay, well, your numbers are okay, your profits, but how are you selling? So what would you do in that next step?
I mean, I think it's really going back into it. I'll ask people often too, in terms of what's the onboarding, what's the training, do they have call tracking? I'll kind of repeat it again. Without patients, there is no business. And sometimes that position is just often so overlooked. Yeah. But let's call it what it is. And I'm going to read three things. I mean, for aesthetics to be successful, we have to attract the patients, right? So that's an external marketing. We have to get them to pick up the phone or do a web lead. And if they're able to do that, then we have to convert them. That part is broken. It is a broken part. Yep. Okay. They're not able to convert. And I always talk about the benchmarks, and that conversion ratio should be 70%. And if I ask people, they literally don't know because they don't track. So if we talk about the lead acquisition cost for a med spa, it's around $250 to $300. So every time that patient's lost on the phone, that business has lost that. And for surgery, it's upwards of $500. That's a lot of money. And so if we can just kind of, take a step back and really, as a leader, you're the doctor, you're the NP, whoever's the owner, really setting an expectation of what do you want your practice to be like? And what are the expectations being set forth? And making sure that everybody within the practice is aware of that.
That's awesome. I think, do you have any other questions, Brad? Well, Terri, we're so grateful to have you on the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. We're going to say goodbye, go into a commercial, and on the other side, Brad and I will share kind of some legal wisdom on things that you should be watching out for on kind of marketing and advertising in the medical space. Well,
you guys are amazing. I always love spending my time with you. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Grateful. And Michael, you are next on the T. Ross podcast.
Awesome.
So thank you. All right.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks, guys, so much. Bye-bye.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
And welcome back to the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, we had just a great talk with Terri. And as you heard, for those who don't know and you could see her, she is a ball of energy. So it was fun catching up with her, hearing her story. And what I loved about Terri's story is that she talked about all the different aspects of what you need to concentrate on. And, one of the things a lot of people, when they do jump into the marketing piece, as Terri was saying, these are the things you need to do, they start losing their path as to that, we still are in the medical industry. And Michael, I think we should at least discuss some of the issues about marketing in the medical industry.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those areas that anyone that has kind of some business experience, what we're going to talk about is counterintuitive, and there's kind of principles that you go into when you're talking about advertising and sales in a normal business, and then there's advertising and sales in healthcare, and understanding the traps that can have significant penalties. And so the principle is understand that regulators, using that term broadly, really want to be protective of patients in healthcare, and so they want to make sure that there is nothing that impacts the purity of patient care through sales tactics or advertising tactics. That's at the broadest level. But if you talk about advertising, they're regulated on many fronts. And for our doctors out there, it's regulated by the medical board, but also the other governing boards will regulate advertising. The medical societies out there, the American Medical Association. So there's a broad coverage of just how do you advertise. And remember, advertising is everything. It's print, it's digital, social media, and so you got to watch out for that. And then on the sales side, especially, we're talking to Terri, in an elective field in aesthetics, there's a lot of programs like Refer a Friend and rewards programs. You'll commonly see, doctors say, hey, I want to reward this hair salon who keeps referring me patients. And understand that there are kickback laws, both federal and state, that can have significant downside risk to these different sales tactics. And so anytime you're dealing with a contract where you're trying to, or an arrangement where you're trying to incentivize someone to send patients to your practice or your medical spa, which is also a practice, then you have to watch out for that, and you have to watch out for the potential kickback implications.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, one of the things, you and I both have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of these people in the industry, and a lot of them have not come from any medical background, but they come from an incredible background in marketing. And so even those who in Terri's case, she's worked with people who don't know how to market. We've met those who are incredible marketers. I met people who used to market for Dillard's or for other gymnasiums or hair and makeup products, and then they get into the med spa space, and they're trying to do the same type of marketing they did for their other businesses, and they don't realize, no, there's significant rules. And even if you're a cash-based business, the Federal Trade Commission is a perfect example of a company, that they will view what you're doing. And if you're putting stuff out there that can be deceptive advertising, they can shut you down. That's happened multiple times where the FTC has issued warning letters to IV bars, med spas, including during COVID-19. There's been a ton of activity of these IV bars saying, oh, come to us and we'll help deal with COVID. And so they've shut those down or sent cease and desist, and we're talking like large penalties. One of the cases that I'm aware of, it was $41,000 per advertisement per day until they took it all down. So again, you have to be very careful. You said it could be anywhere. It could be a brochure. It could be on your website. It could be on a billboard, whatever it is. And so that's just the federal side of it. And then you mentioned the societies. All the societies have their own piece. The American Medical Association also has some warnings about how they feel a physician should, again, grand scheme of things, how they should advertise themselves. But as most people who are listening will realize, the AMA really doesn't have any control. So you have to go look at your medical boards. And I can cite to you, 4 or 5 different medical boards off the top of my head who all follow the same concept. Anything that they consider as false, deceptive, or misleading is going to be a big problem for them. We've actually, in a separate podcast, we've actually talked about that before, about how you can get in major trouble with this. So I think it's great. I think people like Terri, who know this business, who know how to market, are the kind of individuals you want to partner with, because she understands how to, A, bring that person in, but 2, or B, she also understands that there are limitations of what you can and can't do. And so those are the important things. So if you are out there trying to figure out ways to boost your med spa or your medical practice, make sure that person has that background that understands the medical industry.
Awesome.
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.